Dave, welcome to Timelines. Before we start, you just tell us something that's going to grab the listener's attention.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And one of my favorite principles, which you were getting me to revisit, is no plan survives contact with the enemy. So plan early and often.
Plan early and often. So planning will grab their, well, you got to get more than that to grab their attention. You're an
Well,
interesting guy. You've done a lot of neat things, been in a lot of shows.
so
So
let me give you right off the bat a tactical trick. Everybody wants to know the tactics of being persuasive and influential. And by the way, I believe in ultimately using persuasion skills to become influential. And here's what I mean by that. Persuasion's hard work. You got to get people to change their minds and think about things and see them in a different way and come around to your way of thinking. It can be done, but it's very hard work a lot of times. But when you're influential, it's because you've used persuasion in a place of trust and you built trust with people so that they turn to you and they look to you and they ask you questions. They're already in a receptive mood and a receptive mode. So that's going to serve you well. But here's a little trick that all your listeners can use. I call it the 6-word question. So do you have children?
I do. I do. I have 3 kids, a son who's in the Coast Guard as a lieutenant and 2
Beautiful.
girls in high school, 14 and 16. And they are a lot of work.
Oh yeah. So here, you'll like this one. If you ask a child to do something that you know is good for them, it's important, they should do it. And they're a little afraid usually when they say this and they say, no, I can't. When a child refuses or says they can't do something, what's a supportive parent say? Yes, you can. Or sure you can.
Right.
And here's the problem with that. Whether we're doing that with a child or somebody that's refused an order that you've given them, or whether you're doing it with somebody that's got to do something at work for you, here's the problem with that. If they say they can't, you say, yes, you can. You think you're being supportive, but you're engaging immediately in argumentation. You just contradicted what they said, and they go inside and they come up with all the reasons they're right, you're wrong. So instead, I learned a little trick years ago that has served me well, probably maybe millions of dollars. Rather than say, yes, you can, so that should catch the attention of the listener. Rather than say, yes, you can, I say, I know you feel like you can't yet. So here's the thing about that. You're in apparent agreement with them that you told them to do something. They said, I can't. They're afraid to, probably. You said, I know you feel like you can't yet. When you say yet, which is a presupposition that they can, their brain has to, in order to understand your language, make a picture of themselves and experience themselves being able to do it sometime in the future. It's not very threatening, but it seems like you totally and utterly agreed with them. So here's what happens then. Then I look around, and if it's my kids, when they were little especially, I said, where's your mom? Because when a dad says, where's your mom? What's next is awesome. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. You said something, you've actually changed their neurobiology because now they've got neurotransmitters that make them a little anxious, a little curious, wondering what they're going to hear. So they lean in and you lean in. And then I use the 6-word question. I say, I'm just curious or I'm wondering, because that means there's no judgment here. When you're just curious, you're just curious. And so I say, I'm just curious or I'm just wondering. And here's the 6-word question. What would happen if you did, or what would happen if you could? Now, this makes them biologically, to understand what you're saying, imagine themselves having the capability and being able to do it. So you go from just saying, yes, you can, and seeming to be supportive, but really arguing, to really moving people. Now, at work, admittedly, it would be weird to say, Janice, where's your mom? But if you just lean in, if you say, Janice, could you get me that report by Tuesday? She says, no, I can't. If you just lean in and go, come here for a second. She's going to have that same anxious, curious effect. She's going to lean in and listen to you. And you say, I'm just curious, Janice, what would need to change? What would have to happen in order for you to feel completely sure and certain you could get it to me by Tuesday? Oh, well, Dave, I would need somebody to cover the phones for me. So he just went from a bald refusal and a certainty that she couldn't do it to being able to do it with something that's within your power. So it's a very cool technique. It's called the 6-word question.
The 6-word question. Wow. Say that again. What is the 6-word question again?
The 6-word question is, there's a bunch of other things going before and after it, but the 6-word question itself is, what would happen if you did?
What would happen if you did? Boy, that's excellent. That could be the title of the show. What would happen if you did?
Or what would happen if you could? And I like to have lots of little variations of these, because if you do the same thing with the same person all the time, they're quickly going to catch on. But this is one that works at the biological level of understanding communication.
Well, that's fascinating. Hey, tell a listener a little bit about you and what you do and how you evolved. You've been in real estate, you're an attorney, you've gone cobalt, all these different things. You're very supportive of the military and work around it. You have some black ops stuff up here. You know a lot of folks. So how did this all happen?
It's a very strange story, but And my mom always tells me not to brag, so this may sound like that, but I've just had a blessed life. I left home when I was 16, moved to New Zealand. That sort of empowered me to realize that change is a constant, and you can really do a lot when you put your mind to it. I came back. I'd always worked as a kid. I came back with this combination now of a really good work ethic and this sense that just about anything was possible, and that you could be very persuasive to people when you put your mind to it. I came back, formed businesses, got recruited to learn to do some interrogation. That really made me a better businessman, because I always looked at interrogation as finding out why people made decisions to trust me or not. Trying to understand when they reached the end of that zone of trust and when they started to lie to me. Figuring out, okay, how do we reestablish trust and make that a bigger circle where they're going to share more information with me? And so that served me really well when I needed to build a law practice. I worked for a big firm when I got out of an Ivy League law school, and then I left to form my own firm, didn't have a single client, and I had to figure out how to bring them in. And so I used those same techniques. I figured out what are my clients' problems, the ones I really want to work for. What are their problems, and what is the language they use to describe them? Because lawyers do this all the time. They don't market. The ones that do market use technical lingo that nobody understands, and they're coming from a place of, I know what's good for you, not what do you want. So when I stood that on its head and really found out what people wanted, that I was more valuable to them, and they understood me and I understood them, and they paid me more. And so here we are.
Marketing is so important. You know, it's not only attorneys that talk about technical lingo. It's almost anybody in any field who has a lot of expertise.
Yeah, experts.
Not to relate, relatability. You know, I talked to you, I worked with PhDs. They're very skilled in their area, but sometimes I found that many were not broad-based skill sets, especially where we were. They're very knowledgeable in what they did, but maybe they were lacking in other areas. Do you see that with people too?
I do. Are you familiar with the television show Scorpion, by any chance?
I've heard of it.
It's a real team. This guy's a very brilliant, like high-level IQ, multiple PhDs, I think. He recruited a bunch of PhDs, and then he recruited what he calls super nannies to help them that have a high emotional IQ, to help take these guys who are super bright and translate what they're able to do for people in language that they can understand. It's a brilliant concept, because I work with a lot of PhDs, and they know what we need, but they don't know how to tell us.
You know, one of my jobs was keep the PhDs alive.
That's dangerous in the wrong environment. They
in Afghanistan, a lot of them had too much trust, to tell the truth. They just didn't know. There only a few were afraid. But generally, were like they were just in a different world, and they didn't realize there weren't the presence around them, what the dangers were.
There's no. I do find that with PhDs, once you tilt over a certain IQ level,
right,
it becomes almost a detriment. You really have to learn situational awareness. It's not natural for them.
You know, I was just talking to somebody about, he hired a bunch of PhDs to do a test, gave them $250,000 each to go and invest in the market. And why they failed was because they said they believed so much in themselves that they're right, that they would follow a stock down and not recover from it.
Yep. I believe that. Now, don't hold this against me, but my cousin has multiple PhDs and he's in the Pentagon. But he's a rare bird. He really could sort of deal with both ends of the communication spectrum.
There are amazing PhDs you run into too. I mean, they're all are very intelligent people for sure. It's just it's a different mindset, and they associate usually with other PhDs. That's their friends or their association.
But there's a danger for anybody that's listening, that's starting a business or running a business or really that relies on their skill as a communicator, which is that we all think that the words we say mean the same thing. It's exaggerated with PhDs, but all of us think that when we're talking to somebody, that they're making the same pictures in their head and understanding the same thing. And what great communicators and persuaders and really influential people know is that isn't true at all. And once you find out the language that your subject uses and you're better at using it, you still better check with them, because it varies so much from individual to individual. And you better say, when I ask you for a turkey sandwich, what does that turkey sandwich look like? And for your listeners, if I said, tell me about the turkey sandwich that just flashed into your mind, like you got a picture of a turkey sandwich.
I do. I have one right now.
And what does that turkey sandwich look like?
Yeah, very good. So, I'm going to ask you one last question here. You've heard about the avatar concept, your ideal client. Do you believe in that concept, designing your ideal client?
Well, I do in this sense. I think most people do it in a way that's not as effective as it could and should be. So once I decided what I was good at, and I had some evidence of that, other people, you know, paid me money and were very satisfied by it. I was able to really change who I marketed to. I found out that I could market to people in their 40s for trusted estates planning all day long. And they should do it because they had kids, but they didn't. They didn't have the time or the energy or the money or the freedom at work. But once they hit 53, it was a totally different ball game. So at 53, a parent had had a loss or an illness, or had to go to a nursing home, or a friend had passed away. They'd seen the turmoil from not doing it. Their wife or their husband wanted them to do it. And now they had the wealth and the capacity to. So I really did create an avatar that was between the ages of 53 and 67 that lived within 8 miles of my satellite offices. I found out everybody lived there. They had a certain amount of wealth. And by focusing my marketing on this person that I really understood, and I also found out that they said they wanted to save estate taxes, but what they really wanted was to protect their sons and daughters from losing the inheritance in a divorce. So I could go to them and I could find them easily and less expensively to market to them. And I had a value proposition that we knew appealed to them. So we did develop a pretty detailed kind of avatar, but it was the avatar of the people who appreciated us, wanted to buy from us, was easy to sell to, we had high perceived value to them. So the avatar was very carefully thought out. A lot of times people just decide, here's who I want to sell to, without really thinking, are they super skilled at delivering? Does that person really want what they have? Do they have the capacity and desire to pay more? Will there be perceived value there?
Very good. Hey, with that, we're going to go to a break. And on the break, we're going to actually go over some of your websites. So if you want to see the bonus content, come up on Timelines Netcast or timelinesofsuccess.com. And you will find, if you want to watch the YouTube, you will find the special content, and we'll look at your websites. You'll explain a little more about your websites. Hey, we always do a little gap of silence so I can find it when I edit. I'm actually teaching this process. This is what my course is, what we're doing right now. I'm trying to design the easiest way for people to learn how to podcast. And I'm trying to build a community that's not expensive. And I suggest that people actually start not on Skype. I can teach Skype in a heartbeat, but actually using this platform of Google Plus. Its sound is really improved. And
it has.
It's a lot and it's pretty easy, and you can track them. And you don't have to have perfect sound in a podcast, even though my sound is actually pretty good. But it's just better to do it. That's what I'm teaching right now. That's my course. That's what I'm trying to design a course. So that said, let's go to your, let's share up here. And okay, so I'm going to go to this, and we'll talk about this site first. Let me get to present all. And you can see that okay, right?
I can.
Okay, we are recording it. So tell us a little bit about this site. It's successtechnologies.com.
And the reason that I mentioned this to you and for your listeners is, if you go down to the blog here, you'll see there's a section on communication skills and marketing and mind hacks, persuasion and influence and self-improvement. There's some really great articles and great resources in there. And when we find things that we test and that really work for us, then we'll write an article about both the strategy, the strategic use of them, and some tactical examples. So this has been, we get a lot of good feedback on this. People say, I read this article, I went and did it, and it worked.
I love your picture there.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I've worked with people who look like you.
But I did mention to you earlier that my mother-in-law hates that photograph, so I especially love it.
Yeah. So speaking workshops, now, who is your client here? Who are you targeting on the site?
So people, I run events myself, but the people that hire me to come and speak to events tend to be companies that either have me talk to smaller leadership teams that could range from 5 people to 50, or that have me talk to their sales and or marketing groups. Mm-hmm. And those could be quite large. And then sometimes conferences and conventions, especially conferences and conventions revolving around professional practices and small to medium-sized business marketing. Those could be a couple thousand people in the audience.
And you can reach New York City, I take it, from where you live.
I can.
So that's very good. So let's go to the next 3 days to success.
So this 3 Days to Success, we run two kinds of program. One's the kind of kinder, gentler. It's the yin and the yang. The kinder, gentler version. What we teach, for example, last year we were teaching what could we learn from the laws of physics and biology that by extension and metaphorically we could apply to our businesses strategically, and what are the tactics that flow from that. And then on the alternating years, we run either a kind of a mini SEER or a program we call Business Black Ops, where we bring in former military, spies, interrogators, guys that have run counterinsurgency ops, and they teach force multipliers, which is what did they learn, either strategically or tactically, that made them better or stronger or more capable or more able to use limited resources in a bigger way. And then we have them teach, so here's what we learned, here's how we used it to defeat the enemy or kill bad guys, and now here's how we use this in business, either ourselves or when we help other business people.
Oh, very nice. You have beautiful websites too.
Thank you.
So here are the Business Black Ops. I like that. That's a great name.
It is.
That's a great name.
So this is the program I was just describing, and you'll find this humorous. We have people from all walks of life. A lot of former military come to this event, both as instructors and as attendees, because they're running their own businesses now, and it helps them to get thinking, well, how do I use my existing skills more effectively? But one of the things we did was we taught, we equipped everybody with a Glock 19, took them to the Scottsdale gun range. We taught them to shoot, not well, but safely. And then we had a Marine or an SF instructor or somebody at each station, and they would watch the target and they'd give them a little 80-20 kind of piece of advice. One little piece of advice, they'd shoot way better. So it's a very cool metaphor. But while we were there, a number of people said, listen, Dave, I love your program and I learn a lot and I go back and I'm on fire, but I'm not a gun person. I'm not going to shoot the gun. Well, we got them to shoot, and within minutes they were all screaming for more ammo. I mean, like, I'm Winchester, get me more ammo.
That's interesting. The human mind and the psyche, what it does. Mm-hmm. So here's your Twitter site.
Yeah, people are welcome to connect with me there, and I distill a lot of information having to do with persuasion, influence, and marketing there.
And here is your Facebook site. Is that your dog?
That is one of two Jack Russells that live here. It's like living with comedians.
Oh, I can imagine.
They're deranged. They're also killers. They're cold-blooded killers.
Okay. So anyway, we are set. So we're going to come back off the break, and this will be a little extra content to get folks over to websites. So I got to go back over here, hit you, and stop sharing. 1, 2. We can talk a second.
Test. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay. All right, coming off the break, we're coming onto the backside. This is my favorite part. We were finishing up. We just talked about your businesses and all those different things you can do. I'm going to ask you one last question before we go into your success in life principles. I'm going to ask you, in starting a business, if you were to start a new business today, what type of business would you start if you were, let's say, 25 years old?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I can tell you this. I would find a super hungry audience. I would probably find an audience that loved and was naturally attracted to YouTube or some video, source, because it's such an efficient and easy way to reach people with loaded content early on. You can build value so fast. It's interesting you asked me this. My son's 22. He bought a business, but this is a good exercise for him, but it's in a highly regulated area. I would stay away from highly regulated businesses because
can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, sure. He bought an online publishing company that publishes do-it-yourself credit repair. So his audience is sort of 32 to 40. They want to buy a house or a car. They didn't know their credit was messed up. They all of a sudden find out their student loans caused them to have a bad credit problem. And so this kind of walks them through a step-by-step process, which really does work. It's pretty interesting.
You could market to every real estate agent across the country with that to give to clients.
Yeah, he really could. And so, so he's not regulated so highly because he's in the do-it-yourself piece.
Right.
But the next level, which would be if they can't do it themselves and they need help, that's a super highly regulated area right now because there was abuse for so many years.
And state by state, I'm sure. It's
And it varies state by state. And that's the thing. I'm a lawyer, so I'm restricted to practice only in the states where I'm licensed. So I learned my lesson the hard way. I also would build a business where I could get massive leverage. By that, I mean, I could build a business that has value to people other than me and isn't regulated, confined to one geographic area.
I like that. You know, I was in the military, then I was design, build, construction, very regulated, federal and state laws, licensed in California. And we also have brokerages in California and Nevada. Those are regulated business. I agree.
Sure.
It's hard to leverage that. I mean, we leverage money to build subdivisions and stuff, but
Sure.
it's just and it's a risky business.
And that's the thing. It's not that I don't want to comply with reasonable regulations, but it just seems that once the regulators get going, that they become more and more absurd. And scaling is very difficult because so much of your cash flow then gets dedicated to doing these things that do not really serve the customer.
Just bookkeeping alone in a company is an effort. You know that. It takes time and effort. It takes away from productivity, all the requirements. Very good, Dave. I love that. It's Dave, right? Not David. Dave. Dave.
Yeah, most people call me Dave.
Dave, I love your concept. Great idea. Hey, let's go in your life and success principles. First one was time blocking. What's that mean? Yeah,
so this made a gigantic difference to me. By the way, I just thought I should share with you. You gave me a little exercise to do, and I developed some others that I think are really guiding principles to me, but your exercise made my articulation of them really good. But time blocking changed my life. I was constantly being pulled in multiple directions, and I let people do it. And that's contrary to everything I sort of know about leading a team. So ultimately, I just said, I need to block more than afternoons to work strategically on the businesses of the practice. Because of who I am and how I work, I need to block Monday. And at first, people would just try to steal it. And then we made it clear, we're not kidding. Monday's out. And once I had a whole day when I could work on big picture projects and then translate the strategy into the tactical piece I was going to have to follow up with, I could come up with an implementation plan. Man, it changed the whole business. We started thinking smarter. We started getting more done. We started using leverage techniques and force multipliers, and it just exploded the business. We doubled more than 1 or 2 years in a row and have had really nice sustained growth, even as a more mature business.
Very good. Now, the next is the 80-20 principle. Pareto, I think.
Yeah, Pareto. That's exactly right. So people think of this because it was Pareto as a kind of a concept of economics, the 1% kind of concept. But what we found is Pareto's principle is built into everything. You use 20% of your home or apartment 80% of the time. You wear 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time. It's absolutely clear in my case that probably about 20 to 25% of my clients create 80 to 90% of the profit. And so once we sort of figured this out, then we were able to focus on who is it that we best serve and the ones that love us. And then of that group, we'd 80-20 it again and say, of that group, who sends us more clients? And of that group, who sends us really great referrals? They already get it. And by repeatedly taking a cut at the top piece, we were able to really refine who we were going after and who we wanted to work with and who we could most satisfy. And then we did the let's not do this anymore list. And we figured out, what does the person look like who soaks up so much of our time with complaints? We can never satisfy them. They're just not a good match to us. And once we really figured that out, we created marketing that gently repulsed them while attracting the other end of the spectrum. And so we get fewer of them. And now we're good at spotting them because we know who they are and what they look like. And we will say to them, hey, here's a bunch of gifts, but we're not a good match for you. And we will send them off and get them good counsel who will be a better match for them. But we know what we're good at and who we can satisfy. That makes life so much better for everybody, including them.
I know several young attorneys who want to start their own practice who actually listen to this podcast. I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
And this goes back because you're pretty interesting guy, especially getting going and setting up businesses. Now, I'm not going to ask you if you're a young attorney, but if you were to move to a new city in your state and set up a practice, how would you apply that rule? How would you get going? You know how hard it is to build a new client base.
Yeah, but it's harder it's like hunting ducks. If there's a bunch of ducks in the air and you're just shooting into the air, you're not going to get them. You got to pick out the one you want and track it. And I did this when I went to law school. I said, what do I want to study? And I said, well, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up, at that time was the second fastest aging state. And three of the counties around Philadelphia, and I was at law school at University of Pennsylvania, were three of the most wealthy counties in the country. So I said, let me get this straight. We've got a rapidly aging population that's super wealthy. So I put offices right there when I moved out of Philadelphia, right in those to serve those counties. So I was thinking ahead. I went where the people were that I wanted to serve. And I had a clear idea of what I liked doing and what I wanted to do. But I just kept refining it. I kept narrowing my focus of what I was doing and who I was doing it for, is what made me, well-to-do or wealthy, whatever you want to call it. Not appealing to everybody. Appealing to everybody is kind of a recipe. It's so tempting, but it's the strategy that results from fear. You're afraid that I'm not going to have enough money to do this. But weirdly, you require less money to attack and to dominate a niche than you do to try to appeal to everybody. And so I have helped a lot of young attorneys get started, and very, very, very consistently, I found the ones that we could figure out what they loved doing, what they like to do best, what kind of team they'd have to build, and then who we go after to get that. The narrower that was, the better. And it takes courage to say no to work. But a lot of people will respect that and come back to you when you're going to do the thing for them that you do well and that they now need.
That's a point itself. Courage to say no. That's a nice line. Hey, the next we're going to use force multipliers.
Yeah. So the key again for me was trying to get more out of the resources that I had available to me, trying to do more with the expenditure of less time without sacrificing quality. So the example that I give to the civilian world to sort of illustrate what force multiplication is about, and it can take many forms, is a force multiplier in the military is night vision. So if you take a force of 5 men, you provide them with night vision and a reasonable amount of training, and they get to choose the battlefield at night, they will have a 5 times force multiplier, at least over an enemy that is well trained but doesn't have night vision. And so there's a technological force multiplier. But force multipliers result, your SF, I couldn't tell what it was, but I saw your coin. And that sort of careful selection and elite training of operators coupled with night vision gives you a synergistic effect. You not only have a courageous, carefully selected, well-trained warrior, but you've given him night vision. That's more than doubling the effect of the force multipliers. So I was asking myself, how can we do this in business? And of course, there are all sorts of ways. Implicit in the example I just gave was that careful selection, knowing what we want and need, careful selection of our team members, and then consistent, really good training that makes them better. So I'm always looking to train leaders at every level in my organization so that I'm not making the decisions about what paper to get for the photocopier. And if somebody has a standard operating procedure in my office and they're running into resistance because some circumstances have changed and they're on the front lines, I want people that are smart enough that I can trust them to change the standard operating procedure and just let me know it changed.
I like how you run your office. That's cool. I can
It
relate
is very
to that.
cool. It makes for very happy people.
I've been around real estate brokerages I'm on the construction side, but yeah, I guess you could try to do that. You could. I think, but it's a unique environment. Mostly women sales folks. We have a couple of men. It would be interesting to apply some of those tactics and systems and processes. Very good. Hey, team and culture. Trump technical skills.
So in my experience, if we get the right people and they're happy at work, and they're good learners by definition, we're going to be able to instill in them the technical skills. The technical skills are the least of my worries. And I used to have that backwards. So I used to try to hire people. I hired a tax lawyer one time, and he seemed very technically adept. He could not see clients. It was a nightmare. He had that curse of expertise that you and I were talking about earlier. And he would never listen to what the client actually wanted. it was all about the taxes to him. And so he would create these elaborate trusts that were beyond the tolerance of the client to deal with. And so there was always a level of dissatisfaction. So then I started hiring lawyers that were smart, good communicators, and had a desire to learn for life. And I could teach them the technical skills, and they could communicate them to the client because they have a pretty high emotional, intelligence quotient. So I believe that team and culture trump technical skills.
For the listener, Dave and I were talking before the show about PhDs and the highly skilled and technical knowledge that they have. And they are all different, of course, but we talked about that ability to relate or communicate to people. And sometimes if you're too technical in your approach, you can't relate because you're too far in advance. And this team and culture trumps technical skills is exactly what we're talking about.
That, and that they would wander off into danger in Afghanistan.
Well, they weren't cognizant. We had this one, and we got so mad at him. He'd walk behind walls and we'd clots. We have to go find him. And oh my gosh, I got really mad because he puts our guy's life at risk. Oh, he was a nice guy. He's my friend too. So it's tough to be. Yeah.
I was just talking to Jocko Willink, the retired lieutenant commander I was talking about earlier. And he said one of the things that he would do to punish his men was if they, strayed from the straight and narrow, is he wouldn't let them go on dangerous missions anymore. And so not being able to go, like while everybody else was packing up and getting ready to roll and hop on the chopper, they had to just stand there. And he said that was punishment.
I can relate to that, especially in that culture. You have a completely different culture when you go to special ops. So those are the guys who want to get on the plane, want to get their parachutes on, want to go. And I can tell you, even in the military, there's a diversity. Some places they fight, like the 82nd, they'll fight to get on the plane. Special ops, they'll fight to get on. Some units say, I don't care, mañana, because the elite units draw that kind of culture and people, and that's why they're elite units.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very good. And meditation, meditation and exercise routinely. I agree with that. I don't know about the meditation. I probably should meditate more. I sleep well.
I learned to meditate in, I think it was like 1972 or 74. And I had to borrow the money to take the Transcendental Meditation course from my grandmother because my father said, and I quote, "That's communism." So I learned to meditate and then sort of drifted away from the practice. And then I realized, I have all this stress and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I know how to do this. And so I just made meditation kind of part of my daily practice with the exercise that I do. And I train, I have a second Dan black belt in Taekwondo and a first degree black belt in Hapkido. And so I train physically still. I had a bad spinal cord injury and was paralyzed actually, and sort of fought back through some rehab and had a great result. But I added the meditation to the exercise, and man, I feel good because I'm in a high stress job and I'm responsible for a lot of people and making sure that they, make the money to feed their kids. And so it does help, and it doesn't take very long. And when I'm in Reno next, I'll give you a meditation class.
So I'm going to ask you 60 seconds or less. All I know about meditation, I guess if you think like something blue in the middle of your head or something for a few seconds, that's meditation or something like that. Yeah,
there's lots of different ways of meditating, and there are apps like Headspace or Calm where they'll talk you through different styles of meditation. But quieting the mind and just acknowledging thoughts when they come up without necessarily running off and pursuing them like a little puppy dog after a bone. It does, because that's in us, that I'm following that shiny, I call it the monkey brain. I want that shiny thing.
The monkey brain. We call it squirrel.
Yeah.
We go squirrel, squirrel run around. Very good. So that sort of fits it. We're going to go to a break, and we're going to come back with how the listener can get a hold of you, a little commercial from you, and finally one last question.
Thank you.
Okay, Dave, coming off the break, we're going to get into it. So first of all, how can the listener find you, get a hold of you?
So on social media, I post a lot of information, particularly about moving from being persuasive to being influential. And you can use that for marketing, better relationships in business. Interestingly, those who have served in the military will find a lot of these concepts were instilled in leadership training. But weirdly, war and good relationships share a lot in common. And when you're a really, really good communicator, it's the ultimate leverage because you're better at everything. So if you want information about that sort of stuff, the Facebook /David Freeze or Twitter /Dave Freeze. You could also go to that blog site, successtechnologies.com/blog. That is a killer good one. And you could call my office anytime, 610-933-8069. Lisa or Tammy they are the gatekeepers, and they're tough, but you could get through to me.
And you have a phone system like we have in California. The punching everything. I've got the same system. Punch it for your code to get in. Anyway, it's a joke because we're actually connecting on different sources, Skype as opposed to Google.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason we're doing Google Plus, because my course is Google Plus. Skype is good too.
I like it. I'm a big Google Plus user.
So anyway, coming through that, a quick commercial. You sort of gave the commercial. Anything else you want to say about your business or something you can do right? Or your course probably is the main thing you want to get folks to, it sounds like.
Yeah, if anybody wants to be trained in that Business Black Ops course is this fall. You would get to see Jocko Willink in a very small audience, which is unusual these days. It's limited to just 40 people. It's almost sold out. And that's at 3daystosuccess.com. Thank you.
And we will have that on timelinesofsuccess.com on the link. And just put in the last name, Frees, on or David, and you'll find it. You'll find this blog post. Okay, going on. And one last question. You don't know what the one last question is.
I don't. It's
being in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure exactly where you geographically are in Pennsylvania.
Oh, so I'm the eastern edge, just outside of Philadelphia.
Oh, just close to Philly. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
I'm in the country though. I have chickens. I get my
Nice.
breakfast out of the coop every morning.
They got the old. There's a National Guard Army Scout unit there, and I think it's the oldest in the country.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's produced more generals and protected the capital than any other. It was formed before the Constitutional Army.
That is interesting. I will say that Boy Scouts produce some amazing characters and some amazing leaders, and an awful lot of spies and snipers.
Not the Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts. I know National Guard.
No. I know that. I know you're talking about National Guard. I'm just saying that's a source of generals. Boy Scouts tend to produce snipers and spies.
Right. And Eagle Scouts.
Eagle Scouts are particular.
What they do. So here, last question. So if you're in Philadelphia or in the outskirts of the country, where do you like to eat? What's your favorite food?
Oh, okay. So in my own little town here in Malvern, there's a great restaurant called Alba, and they're cooking everything on a wood-fired grill, which is fantastic. Philadelphia is just an amazing restaurant town. So there are restaurants by Steven Starr and Vetri. There's an amazing restaurant called Vetri. So just Philadelphia is an incredible place. But we also have the cheesesteak. I would be wrong not to mention it. So I'm going to give you both ends of the dining experience. Vetri for amazing fine dining, and the cheesesteak just for a dirty treat.
Hey, I'm going to ask you to send me an email for my show notes, because we're starting to put the restaurants on, and people go to the restaurants. They actually, when they visit or go through, and I do it too. If I go through town, I'll go one of these recommended places to eat.
So I'll give you some at a couple of different price points.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thanks. Hey, Dave, thanks for coming on Timelines today. We'll have you back next year for an update, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.